The Galactic Council pushed too far. Now humanity refuses to compromise, reaches its breaking point when Council ships fire on Europa Station, killing 17 scientists whose bodies float amid shattered force fields. This warning shot becomes a rallying cry as Earth launches Operation Shadowfall, disabling Council defense networks throughout the solar system without casualties, a technological coup that forever shifts the balance of power. John Miller pressed his hand against the transparent aluminum window, watching the neutron star's gravitational dance as it pulled stellar matter into its orbit. The swirling vortex of superheated plasma created a hypnotic light show against the backdrop of infinite darkness. From this vantage point aboard the United Earth Coalition flagship, Ascendant, he could almost forget the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. "It's quite a view," President Lisa Carter said, stepping beside him. Despite her composed demeanor, John could see the tension in her shoulders, the subtle signs of strain around her eyes. As the first president of the United Earth Coalition, she carried the hopes of 11 billion people, a fitting backdrop for today's meeting. "The Council chose this location deliberately," John replied, turning away from the cosmic spectacle. "A reminder of the forces they can harness, the power at their disposal." He straightened his formal diplomatic uniform, the deep blue fabric embroidered with the silver stars of Earth's United Nations. "A reminder of how small we are." Lisa's eyes hardened. "We may be new to the galactic stage, John, but we're not without our own strengths." The past 3 months since first contact had been a whirlwind of diplomatic exchanges, cultural briefings, and technological revelations. The Galactic Council, a confederation of 17 spacefaring species, had approached Earth with promises of medical advancements that could cure diseases thought incurable, energy technologies that could end resource scarcity, and hints of faster-than-light travel that would open the stars to human exploration. Earth had voted overwhelmingly for probationary membership, seeing it as the path to protection, trade, and advancement. The Council's initial terms had seemed reasonable: cultural exchange programs, technological sharing initiatives, joint scientific ventures. Everyone from political leaders to ordinary citizens had embraced the opportunity with open arms. Until now, the door to the observation deck slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing Captain Kate Summers. Her posture was rigid, her expression carefully neutral. "Madam President, Chief Diplomat Miller, the Council representatives have arrived. They're waiting in the Grand Assembly." John shared a glance with Lisa. This was it, the formal presentation of the Council's full membership requirements after the initial probationary period. "Let's not keep them waiting," Lisa said, squaring her shoulders. The Grand Assembly had been constructed specifically for this meeting, a vast circular chamber with a transparent dome offering views of the neutron star. The Council delegation had already assembled, 12 representatives from different species, each seated at an elevated semicircular table. At the center sat High Councilor Jur, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. "President Carter, Chief Diplomat Miller." Jur's voice was melodious, their universal translator perfectly calibrated to human auditory preferences. "We welcome you to this historic occasion. Today marks a significant step in Earth's integration into the galactic community." John and Lisa took their seats at the lower table directly across from the Council. The power dynamic was clear: Earth petitioning for acceptance, the Council in judgment. "We come eager to formalize our relationship," Lisa replied, her voice steady and diplomatic. "Earth looks forward to full participation in the Galactic Council." Jur's skin rippled with a pattern that John had learned indicated satisfaction. "Excellent. We have prepared a comprehensive outline of the requirements for Earth's transition from probationary to full membership." A three-dimensional holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing detailed specifications in multiple languages. Environmental restoration protocols requiring immediate implementation on all terrestrial bodies under human control. Jur began. Limitations on weapons development, with regular facility inspections by Council security forces. Mandatory oversight of genetic research by Council scientists. Standardization of all communications technologies to Council-approved formats. John leaned forward, studying the scrolling text. These seem extensive for a newly admitted member. The Council has found these measures essential for the peaceful integration of developing species. Another representative interjected, a bulky crystalline entity named Krell. Your civilization is young. Guidance is necessary. Lisa maintained her diplomatic smile, though John noticed her knuckles whitening as she clasped her hands. And what benefits would Earth receive in return for these concessions? Access to medical technologies extending human lifespans by approximately 80 years, sustainable energy solutions, assistance with lunar and Martian habitat expansion, protection from any hostile non-council entities. And how long would this probationary status last? John asked. There was a pause, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the room. Approximately 20 to 50 of your Earth years, Jur replied. Depending on your civilization's adaptation rate. Lisa's smile froze. Half a century of oversight before full membership? For a species that has only recently achieved unified government and rudimentary interplanetary travel. This is a generous time frame, Krell rumbled. Many current members endured longer probationary periods. John exchanged a glance with Lisa. This wasn't what Earth had expected. The initial discussions had suggested a probationary period of 5 years at most. We appreciate the Council's thoroughness, John said carefully. However, some of these terms seem to infringe on Earth's sovereignty in ways our people may find challenging to accept. Jur's skin pulsed with bands of deep blue, patience, or perhaps condescension. All Council members have accepted similar terms. It is the foundation of our stable galactic society. We've made significant technological advances since our initial contact, John countered. Our fusion drive efficiency has improved by 30% in just 3 months of studying Council principles. A commendable achievement, Jur acknowledged, which demonstrates both your species' aptitude and the value of Council guidance. Perhaps modest adjustments to the probationary timeline could be considered, should such progress continue. The meeting continued for hours, with each Council requirement examined in excruciating detail. By the end, John felt a growing unease. Behind the Council's benevolent facade lay inflexible expectations and an unsettling certainty in their right to direct humanity's development. Later, in the privacy of the presidential quarters, Lisa paced the floor. 50 years of supervision, mandatory technology transfers, inspection rights on military installations. John, they're not offering partnership. They're offering a collar and leash. They have access to technology centuries beyond ours, John reminded her. Maybe this is standard procedure. Or maybe we're being naive. Lisa stopped pacing, her expression hardening. I want a full analysis of these terms compared against what we know of other species integrations. And I want it before we make any commitments. I'll assemble a team, John nodded. Paul Jackson from Diplomatic Corps, and perhaps Dr. Susan Wright. She's been working closely with the xenobiology delegation. Good. We need to understand exactly what we're getting ourselves into. The next morning, John found himself in a secure conference room with Paul Jackson, a veteran negotiator with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes, and Dr. Susan Wright, whose brilliance in xenobiology had earned her a place on the first contact team. I've reviewed the terms, Paul said without preamble. They're more restrictive than anything discussed in preliminary negotiations. Susan nodded, her expression troubled. And there's something else. I've been analyzing the historical data they provided on other species integrations. There's a pattern. The Council consistently demands more from species they perceive as aggressive or independent. Define aggressive, John asked. Species with rapid technological development, strong military traditions, or marked territorial expansion tendencies. Susan pulled up a holographic display. Sound familiar? John studied the data. They see us as a potential threat. Precisely, Paul agreed. These aren't standard terms. They're containment protocols disguised as mentorship. The revelation changed everything. Over the next week, intense negotiations ensued. Earth's delegation pushed back on the most restrictive terms, compromising where necessary but holding firm on key sovereignty issues. The Council representatives expressed disappointment, but eventually agreed to a revised framework, a 20-year probationary period with graduated oversight reduction as specific milestones were achieved. It should have been a victory. It felt like anything but. 5 years passed. Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council evolved, but not as humanity had hoped. What began as cultural exchange became cultural assimilation. What started as technological sharing became technological dependency. What was promised as security cooperation became military supervision. The quarterly resource quotas increased incrementally, 20% of Earth's asteroid mining output, then 30, then 40. Council observers, initially welcomed as advisors, became embedded in military bases and research stations. Their recommendations, carrying the weight of mandates. Communications networks, once private, now monitored under the guise of standardization protocols. In a secure underground facility beneath Geneva, John Miller sat with Paul Jackson and Susan Wright, reviewing the latest Council directives. Paul, now serving as Earth's Secretary of Defense, looked haggard, the years of quiet resistance etched into the lines of his face. "They're demanding access to the quantum computing labs in Antarctica," Paul said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Claiming it's part of the technology assessment protocols we agreed to." Susan shook her head. "Those labs aren't even part of the official registry. How did they know about them?" "The same way they know about everything," John replied bitterly. "Their observers see more than they should. Their technology scans deeper than they admit." "I've been compiling a historical analysis," Susan said, activating a secure holographic display. "Patterns from other probationary species over the past 3 centuries. The Council has a playbook, and we're following it step by step." The display showed multiple species trajectories, from initial contact to full integration. Or, in some cases, protectorate status. They identify species they consider potentially disruptive to their order, Susan explained. Then they offer technology too advanced to refuse, establish dependency, gradually increase restrictions, and eventually domesticate them, Paul finished grimly. "Some species rebelled," John noted, studying the data. "What happened to them?" Susan's expression darkened. "Isolated, contained. In 3 cases. Their home systems were placed under permanent quarantine after regrettable conflicts." John felt a chill run through him. "They're herding us toward a choice between submission and destruction." "Not if we choose a third option," Paul said quietly. "We've been integrating Council technology with our own developments, projects they don't know about, capabilities they haven't anticipated." "The Council's surveillance is nearly ubiquitous," Susan warned. "Nearly," Paul emphasized. "President Carter authorized a shadow research initiative 5 years ago, distributed across facilities that appear to be something else entirely. We've made progress." John stared at his old friend. "You've been building weapons." "We've been building options," Paul corrected. "And it's a good thing we did. 3 hours ago. A Council fleet moved into position around Europa. They're calling it a security action in response to alleged weapons smuggling." "That's absurd," Susan protested. "Europa is a civilian research station. It's also where we've made significant breakthroughs in quantum field manipulation," Paul said meaningfully. "Breakthroughs that might eventually challenge Council technological supremacy." John felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Has President Carter been informed? She's calling an emergency session of the Coalition Security Council. I expect she'll want your presence. John. The Coalition Security Council convened in a secure chamber deep beneath the Olympus Mons colony on Mars, one of the few locations believed to be free of Council surveillance. President Lisa Carter, now in her second term, had aged visibly under the strain of the past 5 years, but her eyes remained sharp, her voice commanding. The blockade of Europa represents a direct challenge to Earth's sovereignty, she stated, addressing the assembled leaders. Council vessels have established positions that effectively cut off our research station from supply routes and communications. Have they made any aggressive moves? Asked the representative from the African Union. Not yet, Paul Jackson replied. But they're scanning the facility constantly, and they've ignored 3 formal requests to withdraw. What are they looking for? Asked the Eurasian Federation delegate. They claim to be investigating weapons trafficking, Lisa replied. In reality, they're trying to access research data on quantum field manipulation, technology that could eventually rival their control of faster-than-light travel. John studied the holographic display showing the Council vessels positioned around Jupiter's icy moon. This is a test. They want to see how we'll respond to a direct challenge. Then we should respond clearly, Lisa said, her voice hardening. I propose Operation Breakwater, a formal demand for immediate withdrawal, backed by the threat of coordinated solar system defense measures. The vote was unanimous. Earth would no longer accept Council overreach without resistance. The next day, John found himself once again facing High Counselor Jur, this time via quantum entanglement communication. The Council representative's skin rippled with patterns of deep crimson, irritation or possibly anger. Your demand is noted, Chief Diplomat Miller, Jur said, their melodious voice carrying an edge of steel. However, the Council's security protocols require thorough investigation of potential weapons development violations. The Europa blockade will continue until our inspection teams have completed their work. The Europa Research Station is a civilian facility engaged in fundamental physics research. John replied evenly. Your blockade violates 3 separate provisions of our membership agreement. Research with potential military applications, Jur corrected. The distinction is clearly outlined in Section 47 of the Technological Development Protocols you agreed to. Section 47 requires evidence of militarization before intervention, John countered. You've provided none. Jur's skin flashed briefly, with bands of yellow, frustration. Perhaps. The Council does not require Earth's permission to enforce galactic security measures. The blockade will continue. The communication ended, leaving John with a sense of foreboding. The Council had never been so openly dismissive of Earth's sovereignty before. Something had changed. 3 days later, that change became horrifyingly clear. John was awakened in the middle of the night by an urgent communication from Paul Jackson. The Secretary of Defense's face was ashen, his voice tight with controlled fury. The Council fired on Europa Station. They're calling it a warning action against an unauthorized launch attempt. But there was no launch. They hit the primary life support hub. 17 scientists are dead. John felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. 17? Including Dr. Maria Lopez's quantum resonance team. Paul's voice cracked slightly. Alan Davis is on site. He says the bodies are floating amid the shattered force fields. They're calling it a tragic accident now, claiming their sensors detected weapons activation. There were no weapons, John said numbly. No, just researchers who were getting too close to something the Council wants to keep to themselves. The coffins came home, draped in Earth flags. 17 transparent capsules containing the bodies of scientists who had died in vacuum when the Council's warning shots breached Europa Station's life support systems. The funeral was broadcast globally, the images of those coffins burning themselves into humanity's collective consciousness. Remember Europa became more than a slogan. It became a turning point. Across Earth and its colonies, public opinion shifted dramatically. Protests erupted outside council liaison offices. Military enlistment soared. Politicians who had advocated for closer council integration found themselves facing recall elections. In a secure facility beneath the Mariana Trench, President Lisa Carter met with her inner circle: John Miller, Paul Jackson, Susan Wright, and Captain Kate Summers, now Admiral and head of Earth Space Forces. "The Council has miscalculated," Lisa said, her voice cold with resolve. "They believed a show of force would intimidate us into compliance. Instead, they've united humanity against them." "Public support for resistance is at 94%, Susan reported. "Even the most council-friendly media outlets are calling for a re-evaluation of our relationship." "What's our military readiness?" Lisa asked, turning to Admiral Summers. "The official forces the council knows about? We'd be outmatched 10-1, Kate replied grimly. "The Shadow Fleet? That's another matter entirely." Paul activated a secure holographic display, showing vessel configurations unlike anything in Earth's public registry. "Operation Shadowfall is ready. We can temporarily disable their defense networks across the solar system without causing casualties." "And if they escalate?" John asked. "Then we have options they don't know about," Paul answered. 5 years of reverse engineering and innovation. We can't match their fleet strength, but we can make any victory incredibly costly. Lisa looked at each of them in turn. "I never wanted this confrontation. I've spent 5 years trying to avoid it, to find a middle ground. But the Council has made it clear. They don't want partners. They want subjects." She took a deep breath. "Initiate Operation Shadowfall." 12 hours later, Council installations throughout the solar system experienced simultaneous system failures. Defense grids went offline. Communications arrays ceased functioning. Weapons systems entered emergency lockdown protocols. Not a single shot was fired. Not a single life lost. But the message was unmistakable. Humanity was no longer complying with Council directives. The response came swiftly. A massive Council fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, led by High Counselor Jur's personal flagship. Their communication was broadcast on all frequencies. "This act of aggression cannot stand," Jur declared, their skin pulsing with patterns of deep crimson and black. "Earth has violated the fundamental principles of Council membership. You will stand down your military forces, surrender those responsible for this attack, and accept direct Council administration until your civilization demonstrates sufficient maturity for self-governance." The response came not from President Carter, but from her successor, President Gary Williams, sworn in after Lisa's term ended amid the escalating crisis. The former general stood tall, his expression resolute as he addressed not just the Council, but all of humanity. "For 5 years, Earth has attempted to work within the Council's framework. We have compromised our sovereignty, shared our resources, and followed their directives, even when those directives increasingly restricted our independence. In return, we have received condescension, manipulation, and ultimately, violence." Williams's voice grew stronger, echoing across Earth and its colonies. 17 of our brightest minds died on Europa, not because they posed any threat, but because their research might have granted humanity true technological independence. The Council speaks of partnership while demanding subservience. They offer protection while being the primary threat to our security. He paused, his gaze steady. "Today, I deliver humanity's response. We will not surrender those who defended our sovereignty. We will not accept direct administration by those who have proven themselves unworthy of our trust. And we will not compromise on our fundamental right to self-determination. This is your final opportunity to avoid conflict." Jur's voice cut through, their tone imperious. "The consequences of defiance will be severe." "We are aware of the consequences," Williams replied calmly. "Are you? You're not the first to underestimate humanity's resolve when pushed too far. You won't be the last." As the diplomatic crisis escalated publicly, another story unfolded in the shadows. John Miller, no longer Earth's chief diplomat, but still a respected figure in interstellar relations, traveled secretly to meet with representatives from other probationary council races, the Veltraxians, the Nor Collective, the remnants of the Hyerian civilization, species who had experienced the council's guidance firsthand, who had witnessed the pattern of increasing control. "They don't expect us to fight back," said Veltraxian Ambassador Trell, her crystalline appendages glittering in the dim light of the secret meeting chamber. "In 3,000 years, no probationary species has ever successfully challenged council authority." "Because they've always acted alone," John replied, "just as the council intended. The Hyerian resistance was crushed within days," rumbled the Hyerian representative, a massive being whose species had been reduced to refugee status after attempting to break away from council oversight. "Our military capabilities were completely known to them. They had backdoors into all our systems." "Earth has developed technologies the council doesn't know about," John explained. "We've created systems isolated from their surveillance, but alone. We can't stand against their full might." "You're proposing an alliance." The Nor Collective's voice resonated through their communal consciousness. "A dangerous proposition." "I'm proposing survival," John corrected. "The Council's pattern is clear. They identify species with potential for rapid advancement, bind them with technology they can't refuse, then gradually strip away their independence until they're reduced to client states. They fear innovation, they don't control." "What would you have us do?" Trell asked. "Our worlds are already under Council supervision." "Prepare," John said simply. "When Earth takes its stand, be ready to leverage the confusion, reclaim your sovereignty, and remember, you're not alone anymore." The Council demanded a neutral ground meeting at Epsilon 9, a space station positioned at the crossroads of several major trade routes. They expected the Earth delegation to arrive in a position of weakness, ready to negotiate surrender terms. They were mistaken. When the Earth diplomatic vessel arrived, it was accompanied by a fleet of ships, unlike anything the Council had on record, vessels incorporating both reverse-engineered Council technology and uniquely human innovations. And they weren't alone. Ships from the Veltraxian Alliance, the Nor Collective, and even the scattered Hyerian fleets had taken up positions throughout the sector. The Epsilon 9 station itself had been modified. The human section, once a modest appendage to the main council structure, had been expanded to equal size, a physical manifestation of the new balance of power. Inside the grand meeting chamber, High Counselor Jur found themselves facing not just President Williams and John Miller, but representatives from a dozen formerly subservient species. Their skin fluctuated between patterns of alarm and rage. "This gathering is a violation of Council protocols," Jur began, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Probationary species are not permitted independent diplomatic relations without Council oversight. Those protocols no longer apply." President Williams replied calmly. "We're not here as supplicants, Counselor. We're here to negotiate a new relationship, one based on genuine equality." "Impossible," another Council representative sputtered. "The Council's structure has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years. "Has it?" Susan Wright stepped forward, activating a holographic display. "Or has it maintained Council dominance at the expense of dozens of developing civilizations?" The display showed meticulous documentation of the Council's systematic suppression of technological independence among probationary species, resource quotas that always increased, surveillance that always expanded, research restrictions that always tightened. Most damning were the records of security actions against species that developed technologies the Council considered disruptive to their established order. "Where did you obtain these records?" Jur demanded, their skin pulsing with patterns of alarm. "You should secure your archives better," Susan replied with a cold smile. especially when dealing with species known for their aggressive problem-solving approaches. For hours, the evidence mounted. Species after species came forward with their own testimonies of council manipulation and control. The pattern was undeniable, the strategy clear. The council didn't want peers. They wanted a stable hierarchy with themselves permanently at the top. "What do you want?" Jur finally asked, their melodious voice subdued. "A new galactic charter," President Williams answered. "One that recognizes the sovereign rights of all spacefaring civilizations. One that promotes genuine cooperation rather than hierarchical control. One that values innovation rather than fears it." "And if we refuse?" another council member challenged. John Miller stepped forward. "Then, you lose access to resources from a dozen worlds. You face technological competition from species you've underestimated. And you discover that maintaining an empire through coercion becomes very difficult when your subjects stop believing in your invincibility." The negotiations lasted weeks. The council fought to maintain their privileged position, but their leverage diminished with each revelation of their past manipulations. Finally, facing the united front of formerly subservient species and the technological wildcards Earth had developed, they conceded. The new Galactic Charter was signed on the rebuilt Europa Station, a symbolic location that honored those whose deaths had catalyzed humanity's stand against Council dominance. The document established equal membership with voting rights for all spacefaring species, dissolved the Council's enforcement arm, and replaced it with a balanced defensive alliance against external threats. As the signing ceremony concluded, John Miller found himself standing once again before a transparent aluminum window, gazing out at the stars. Lisa Carter joined him, her term as president long over, but her influence still substantial as an elder stateswoman. "Did you ever imagine it would end this way?" she asked quietly. "When we first met with the council aboard the Ascendant?" "Never," John admitted. "I thought we were entering an age of mentorship and guidance. I never realized we would need to teach them instead." Paul Jackson approached, the years of secret resistance having left permanent marks on his face, but a new lightness in his step. "The Veltraxians are already sharing their crystalline computing advances. The Nor Collective has opened their libraries on dimensional physics. It's the exchange of equals we always wanted." "And the Council?" Lisa asked. "Adjusting," Susan Wright replied, joining their circle. "Some better than others. Jur has actually become one of the strongest advocates for the new system. I think they genuinely didn't understand how their guidance was experienced by other species." "It's a new galaxy," John mused, watching distant ships come and go through the station's massive docking bays, vessels of designs as diverse as the species that created them. One where strength comes from cooperation, not compliance. "There's a lesson here," Lisa said thoughtfully, "about power and resistance, about knowing when to bend and when to stand firm, about what happens when you push too far." John agreed, remembering the words that had become a rallying cry across a dozen worlds. "And find that some of us refuse to compromise." As they stood together, watching the stars, John thought about the long journey from that first meeting to this moment. From hope to disillusionment to resistance to transformation. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, seeking mentors, and found itself becoming a catalyst for change instead. The neutron star was no longer visible from here. That cosmic reminder of overwhelming force, now replaced by the steady light of countless distant suns. Each one potentially nurturing civilizations that would one day join this new galactic community. Not as subjects, but as equals. When the Council pushed humanity too far, they discovered something they hadn't anticipated. Sometimes, the most valuable galactic citizens weren't those who followed the established order, but those who dared to imagine a better one, and refused to compromise until they achieved it.